Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, Principal Atmospheric Scientist at Nutrien Ag Solutions, and I'm going to thank you for watching this weekly Ag Weather Update brought to you by the Farm Credit Associations of North Carolina. We begin with a quick look back at the 2020 hurricane season. So far, we have had 24 named systems, and we're about to add to this pretty quickly here. One thing to point out is that unlike the most recent hyperactive season, that being 2005, where we also went into the Greek alphabet with naming systems, 2020 has yet to produce such high numbers of really powerful tropical cyclones. But I would like to show you where they've made landfall, the ones we've had so far this year. And I want to thank Ian Livingston for producing this really cool radar composite image here of all 9 of the systems that have made landfall so far in the United States. Now, we did have Isaias that came up here just like this earlier this year. And Isaias put down a lot of very heavy rainfall across North Carolina. But what we have not had so far this year are any of the systems that come directly out of the southeast or out of the east slamming into North and South Carolina like we had with Florence back in 2018. What we've gotten, though, is this. For example, Hurricane Sally, or what was left over of Beta. These have both kind of come over here and targeted North Carolina coming out of the west first. And I bring that up to be discussing what we're going to be seeing here in the near term. So looking at our last 30 days of precipitation, we can see the effect of Sally here and then Beta, which came into this area, and much of the North and South Carolina area here sitting somewhere between 125 and 175% of normal on precipitation. So at times things have been quite wet due to these tropical systems coming from the Gulf, coming from the west, hitting the Carolinas. But here's a neat way to put this into perspective. This map put together here by Brian Bretschneider, great follow on Twitter, brilliant atmospheric scientist, ranked from wettest to driest each month throughout the year, and then made a map for the month of October. So it tells you its rank. And what we do here is wettest would be on the top of the color bar and the driest would be down here. We know that October is typically a pretty dry month for us, whereas come back over to this part of Texas where we typically do have some tropical systems coming out of the Gulf, it tends to be wetter. Now, why I show you this is because right now we have 2 tropical systems we need to be discussing. First is Gamma, named over the weekend. It will likely be around the Yucatan Peninsula, moving here into the Bay of Campeche over the next few days. But on the back side of it is currently, as of early this morning, here on Monday morning, Tropical Depression 26. Now, it will likely be named very soon today and get the name Delta. Remember, we're in the Greek alphabet. And what is Delta will be eventually moving into the Gulf of Mexico and could potentially impact, right down here along the Gulf Coast. And as you guessed it, could eventually move here over and get North Carolina once again from a system that hit the Gulf and then came in from the west. But notice in the background before all this happens, higher atmospheric pressures in place is dry, like we would normally expect for the month of October. So from there, what's influencing this pattern? Well, we've been talking now for several months about the developing La Nina, and it's continuing to do so. We see that those ocean temperatures are down here around the minus 0.8 to minus 1 degrees Celsius range, making this a moderate strength La Nina, and we certainly know that those trade winds are still quite strong. There's plenty of cold water beneath us, which means we're going to be dealing with the effects of this La Nina through our winter. Now, a neat way to understand what that particular feature means with respect to tropical systems is to look at this figure. I've shown it to you before. It's the frequency of tropical cyclones here for the Atlantic. We know that we reach a peak right here on September the 10th, but it's neat to notice that historically, we often have a secondary peak that happens somewhere here at this point in the month of October. And I just want to explain to you why that typically is. You see, during the month of September, we can get tropical cyclones that form off of Africa, moving across the open Atlantic. We can also get them coming out of the Caribbean, out of the Gulf, or even some homegrown systems right here along the coast. But as we switch from September and October, part of the reason for that secondary shift is an increase in activity coming out of the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and right here along the east coast of the United States. So it's those regions we're going to watch most carefully as we press through this month of October. Now, why did we get this temporary shutdown in activity as we got to the end of September and beginning of October? We'll take a look at this. East Coast wind shear. We really shot up to finish September, begin October. Same thing out of the Gulf of Mexico. Big increase in wind shear. And those combined features help to calm things down, at least over the last couple of weeks since Sally and since Gamma. Here's another part of this. It was due to the MJO. You see, from August 20th to September 20th, remember how active that time period was? The MJO was over here in phase 1 and 2, and therefore we got a lot of systems developing here off of Africa, coming across, and we still didn't suppress motion too much here over by the Bahamas, over by the Greater Antilles in the Gulf of Mexico. But then as we got into the 20th of September now to the beginning of October, this whole area has been really suppressed in the upper levels of the atmosphere as the MJO moved over into phase 4, 5, and 6, where it currently is sitting and not moving. Now, thinking about that, that means the best upper level support for tropical precipitation is going to be here, inside this circle, right in this part of the world. But if you notice, over in our neck of the woods, in the Gulf, in the Caribbean, along the East Coast, we do not have the big suppressing cap of motion like we have here and like we have here, which means we're going to watch this area carefully as we move through October for future development. So what's been going on? Well, over the weekend, this is Sunday here, so this is the sun setting last night going across the country. You can see the broad shield of clouds that was with us much of yesterday into the overnight hours. That's actually the northern edge of Gamma. And one thing to note here as I pause this, the western United States still dealing with a lot of forest fire activity. You can see the smoke here in the imagery, plus this large fire that is still sitting here on the border between Wyoming and Colorado causing a lot of problems. But let's come back to the tropics, because we've noticed that the heaviest precipitation has been streaming off of Gamma and has been right here along the coast. Otherwise, much of this past weekend was dry for most of North and South Carolina. Well, here's what Gamma was doing in the overnight hours last night into early this morning. You're looking at infrared satellite temperatures. Basically, the brighter those colors, the healthier the storms are. There's going to be one problem that Gamma's going to have. You see, the wind shear is taking the tops of these storms are blowing in this direction, but the low-level guiding winds are actually going to be taking Gamma in that direction. Delta is over here. You can see the healthy convection there, and that's going to continue to spread right here to cut on this side of Gamma. Now, why tell you that? Well, take a look at this. We will notice that over the next 5 days, Gamma is going to sit and spin and move toward the Bay of Campeche. It's not expected to get very strong, but it is going to interact with the eventual path of Delta. And Delta is forecast here, according to the National Hurricane Center, to become possibly a Cat 1, Cat 2, maybe even stronger hurricane before targeting the lower Mississippi River Valley. The European model ensemble in the background there, notice, takes what's left of Delta and pulls it here over toward the Appalachian Mountains and toward the Carolinas. We need to talk about that eventual track here in a few moments. So what's going to make this hard to forecast? Well, this is an animation here that's going to show you first Gamma, then Delta, and how they're going to kind of guide and direct one another. So Gamma here, Delta there. As I play this forward, you do notice, and we're going to stop it here. This is now Tuesday evening. Gamma went diving right here in the Yucatan Peninsula. And at this point, a strengthening delta is coming around the backside. Now remember, the circulation around Gamma is basically going to take Delta and fling it here into the central Gulf of Mexico. And that's exactly what happens. The potential for this to strengthen as it goes in this direction is high, given how warm the water is here. Now, beyond, let's just call this Thursday morning, get you right here, to know exactly where what's left of Delta is going to go is very difficult to figure out. Will it be coming over targeting more of Texas? Will it be targeting more like the New Orleans area, or go somewhere in between? Today's operational European model run takes it right in between, as you see here. And then it's going to pull it into the lower Mississippi River Valley, through Mississippi, Alabama, over toward the Carolinas. And that's what I want to show you. Through this week, all the way through Friday, we will have very low chances of having precipitation in North Carolina. And it won't be till the end of the week that we get chances in South Carolina. Look, this is the GFS on the left, European on the right, both of them picking up on the same thing. But notice how consistent they are with where Delta will be going here. So if we go from here to that time period of October 10th to the 15th, now we start to see where the European model is spreading much of the precipitation from Delta. And I'm going to zoom in and show you the model differences here. So this is only next weekend's precipitation. And I want to remind you something. There's still quite a lot of uncertainty in this. But when we look out here for next weekend, I have the GFS total precipitation on the left and the European total precipitation on the right. It seems to be pretty clear in both models that as you go toward the west, the precipitation amounts increase, as you can see there. But notice the operational European model is much drier over when you get to the eastern half of North Carolina, whereas the whereas the GFS, apologize for that, is wetter in this area. So this just means this upcoming weekend, we're going to have to watch out for the potential for some heavier rainfall from these two, from both models picking up on the eventual path of Delta. Now, outside of that, I've got to take you half a world away. You see, the most important feature beyond these two tropical cyclones is actually sitting right here. You see, that trough that's coming through this part of Japan is eventually going to team up with this trough that's sitting here in the Gulf of Alaska. You see, that's been supporting this big ridge out west, which has brought in the heat and the fires. But do you see these three separate circulations right there? Well, it's going to be amazing to watch, but this trough is going to come flinging over the top like this and dig into the Gulf of Alaska and meet up with these three troughs to completely change the pattern across the west. And yes, that has importance for us in the Carolinas. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So here we go. There's the trough I want you to watch. Now, right now, we still have the cooler weather associated with this trough today, and we still have our upstream blocking here. Our downstream. It's away from us. Downstream blocking here over Europe. And this is the deep trough that's cutting through Europe, causing all the flooding issues you heard about over the weekend, for example, in France. Okay, come back here with me to this trough. Ready? As we play this forward, I'll pause it right there. Do you see how it moved quickly here? It's now trying to get its way into the Bering Sea. Now, as that happens, the deeper trough that's here over the eastern part of North America is going to kick out finally by the time we get through Tuesday of this week. And that's going to warm things back up. Now, notice this. Our trough, which we were watching over Japan, is now reinforcing this Aleutian Islands trough. And here is what happened with those three separate circulations now forming kind of almost as one right here just off the west coast. See the little thing down there? That's Delta. Okay, see the difference between these big mid-latitude systems and hurricanes? Well, as we move forward here, this is now going through the day on Friday and into Saturday. We're going to have to deal with the cloud cover and precipitation over the weekend from Delta. But overall, the pattern is building back into a ridge, which signifies a bit of a warm-up. And as this trough kicks through, following Delta, we're going to have a nice sizable warm-up, but we're going to have to be dealing with a big system moving in the middle part of the country for the start of next week. And we're going to watch for a highly volatile pattern like this to continue as we move throughout the month of October, which is going to make long-range temperature forecasting very challenging. That's why we're going through these details. Well, let's just see this all play out. Okay, first things first, this is Gamma. Delta's off the page. There is high pressure in place, and let's see where that high pressure system goes. Yeah, it settles right over us in the Carolinas throughout the beginning of this week. Now, here we are on basically Wednesday at midnight, getting into Wednesday morning, afternoon, and evening. And there goes Delta. We are still going to be over here relatively dry under the influence of higher atmospheric pressure. Going through Thursday into Friday, and now into Friday afternoon. Let's stop it there. Here's our high pressure cell in place. But we notice that at this point, Delta has now made landfall, and it's going to get pulled very quickly over toward the Appalachian Mountains. That's Saturday morning. Watch this. Saturday afternoon and evening. And it'll be during that time period that we're going to watch most carefully for our heaviest rains potentially to be coming out of Delta. Now notice the European model keeps it focused over here on the western side of the state, but it still means our chances for precipitation next weekend increase. But Delta's on the move. By Sunday afternoon, things look cleared out. And here is the first piece of that deep trough that cut into the west. But it's going to take some time. Look at this. This is now Monday morning, Monday afternoon and evening, getting out into next week. We're going to have high pressure take back over after Delta, and it may not be until the middle or end of next week that that system I was so worried about over Japan finally cuts through and increases our chances of rainfall here for the Carolinas. But it's still a highly volatile pattern. If we didn't have Delta come through, this would have been an extremely dry time period for us here in the Carolinas, which is why I showed you that map from Brian Bretschneider, which tells us what things would look like normally. All right, is there any good model agreement about that second system? Well, you can see the GFS, by the time we get up to the 13th, says, yep, there's a trough there. So does the European. So they're putting in this deep upper level low that's going to cut through here. And what I'm going to wait for what is this, middle of next week, is for that front to finally make its way over to the Carolinas. Those are your next two chances of precipitation, Delta and this low. A lot of details about them, but that's what I've got for you. Into week 2, see the GFS pulling that low through? It's also here in the European, but we see in both models near normal precipitation. The European is still keeping very active tropical cyclone development coming out of, well, the Yucatan Peninsula, the Caribbean, and that part of the Gulf of Mexico. So I'm going to watch it carefully and report back to you next week. But overall, signals into week 2 are relatively weak and keep us near normal on precipitation. So what about temperatures? Well, in my neck of the woods this morning, we had a frost. But will those colder temperatures make it all the way over to North and South Carolina? Well, I don't think they will. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Monday's high temperatures today, we're going to crack that 70-degree mark, looks like. And as we play this forward, let's see how things change for Tuesday. Go back up to the middle 70s. And as we get into Wednesday, that's our warm day here. A lot of mid to upper 70s, even cracking 80 degrees. As we then get toward Thursday and Friday, remember, this is when the cloud cover from Delta starts to spread into this area. Plus, we have a system that kind of sneaks in here into the northeast, and we could get some cooler weather from that. As we go from Friday into Saturday and Sunday, again, we're going to stay on the cooler side of things until Delta moves out on Sunday, allowing for the temperatures to warm back up. What about the 6 to 10 day time period? Well, this will be when the jet stream is adjusting to that deeper trough west and a broader ridge here. And you can see it in both models. Therefore, our temperature pattern will stay more on the relaxed and on the warmer side of things, moving out here toward the middle of October. From there, let's go out and look all the way out to the day 15 time period. Now, one thing I notice is that the models do not necessarily agree on the 11 to 15 day pattern. They both want to keep this side warm, and there's a chance for some cooler weather in through here, but still, this is what happens when you transition seasons. We lose some of the continuity in our model agreement here, which means once we get to mid-month, we got a lot to be paying attention to. I'd show you the week 3 and week 4 forecast, but it bounced around so much over the weekend, it's putting too much confusion into the forecast, which means we're going to have to live within a 2-week time frame right now as we transition through the month of October. What I'll finish with then is a quick look at a few places internationally. When we come down to South America, very hot, very, very hot in Brazil's central and southern growing areas. And we still have yet to see the monsoon return. The heaviest precipitation's down here in southern Brazil. I'm talking about Paraná, Rio Grande do Sul. But so far, this is a very late start to the monsoon. So getting all the way out to the middle of this month, not too wet. When do we see the monsoon returning? It may not be until the 3rd week of October. And why bring all this up? Well, normally this time of year we would see very aggressive planting of soybeans. But this year those soybeans have been a bit delayed, and they're going to have to wait on these monsoonal rains to return at the end of October. But they can plant very quickly. What this might end up doing is affecting the safrinha corn and safrinha cotton crop, possibly getting put in a little bit later than ideal. That's what I'll think about there. And I'll finish with just a quick update on Europe. We have seen a very volatile pattern move through Europe due to that blocked high over low pattern. It's produced a lot of flooding in France and other places around Europe. And you can see that through the next 10 days, very unsettled pattern in terms of precipitation over there on the left. Where the precipitation is missing is eastern Ukraine and the Russian wheat belt. And these very dry conditions here, plus the very dry conditions in the southern U.S. wheat belt, means that 2 of our major producing areas globally are having problems with getting winter wheat planted. Just something I wanted to keep in the back of your minds. Okay, we'll watch the tropics carefully. I'll keep you updated, and I look forward to giving you another report next Monday. Until then, have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.